Here on Tiny Home Heroes, we share community stories so our followers can learn more about tiny homes, the businesses that build them, and the people who live there. Today, we have one of the most interesting couples I've met in a long time. Intelligent and innovative, they've teamed up to become a formidable tiny home team. Are you ready? Let's get started. Valerie and John Berkenpas, you've been in your tiny home for a while now. You've been married since 2010. Take us through the idea. What made you decide to go tiny, and how maybe a story or two about how that process went?
Okay, so the thing that actually got us looking at a different type of lifestyle was we were visiting our son and daughter-in-law, and they had a book by Lloyd Kahn, and it was called Shelter. And in that book, there's all these different ways that people live in different houses, and everything is really unique and interesting. So that kind of struck a chord with us. And we really didn't know anything about tiny houses. We hadn't researched them. We hadn't looked into them. But after reading that book, we kind of did a little bit of searching, and we found a tiny house builder in Vancouver. And we sat down with him and kind of discussed the possibilities. He let us tour some, and we went back home and talked about it some more. And we drew some pictures. John has a drawing background. He's a draftsman.
Well, what did that look like? Even that process, that's the drawing pictures, and you being a draftsman. How long did you spend, and were there any interesting conversations you might have had during that process of like just designing this home that you're living
Um,
Yeah, so Val did a lot of the design. We talked about what's our priorities, right? So we looked at, you end up with you start with a shell. And when we walked through the ones that we were allowed to see that meant tiny homes we're building, we looked at it and said, yeah, we like this, but we'd rather have this. So Val's really likes to cook, and she wanted to have a big enough cooking area that it wouldn't, hinder her from being able to be able to cook. So to tell you the truth, the kitchen area in our home here is bigger than the one that we had in the house that we were living in.
Yeah.
So Val actually built the countertops for it, and we have more counter than we had before. So we worked out priorities. Okay, what's a priority? Because you only have so much room. Is the bathroom a priority? So we worked out priorities, and it was some give and take as to how to build it. We wanted a wood stove. We need area for that.
Yeah, being in a cold climate, we definitely had some things. We wanted the wood stove, and we needed a closet. We wanted a closet to put boots and coats in. We didn't want those sitting out being, right where you're living. So those were two things. The cooking area.
It took some work, some give and take. How much room do stairs take? What do you do with stairs? That kind of thing. And to tell you the truth, even though I draw a lot, Val did most of the design. She sort of looked at it, and we did it between the two of us. But at the end result was mostly, Val's design. So we had a good teamwork there.
John's the number guy, so whenever I would lay something out, he would like, "Well, that's not going to work. You don't have the room for that. It has to be this." So
yeah, and then the builder himself. I don't know if they're like that anymore. But, when we approached them, they'd only started building for a few years, I think. And so they were very flexible. They said, we'd go to him with an idea, and he'd look up and go, oh, I think I can do that. And then we'd come with another idea. Yeah, I think I can change it to do that. And so they were very flexible about what we were going to do inside the home. So, it took some time for us to put it together.
From the time that we first walked through to the time that we actually put our deposit on was probably about 2 years. And in that 2 years, the plan changed a lot. And then once they started building, we even changed things. We would come and say, well, can you put this in, or can you change that? We wanted, we have kind of pocket doors for our bathroom laundry room, and we wanted opaque glass in them. So that was a last minute thing. They changed that. We opted for a dishwasher at the last minute, so they put that in for us.
Yeah, we have a dishwasher. I had to talk Val into it. So Val's like, we don't need a dishwasher. And I thought, you know what? We might kick ourselves for not getting a dishwasher. And we got one, and we use it a fair amount.
I love it. Yeah, I'm glad that we have it.
Yeah, we've got all the appliances. It's just like a normal house. I don't really feel like we live in a tiny house, although it is. It just feels like a house.
We don't go without anything.
We can see behind you quite well, and I'll be honest with you. You're not the first interview I've said this to somebody living. Tiny homes nowadays, if you design them right, they don't look like a tiny home if you can't see the whole thing. Meaning that it's essentially just a normal, wonderful, large, well-designed home. It just happens to be smaller.
Yeah, we have this vaulted ceiling, and I think that gives it a real air of space. And what the other crucial thing that we said from the get-go is windows, lots and lots of windows,
Lots
which
of
we
light.
have. We wanted even more windows, but we had to cut one out because of our wood stove placement. With skylight in the loft and windows in the loft, and the whole top is lined with windows.
Wow.
So that's crucial.
So the way it's set up at sunrise, the light all comes in, and on a cold night it warms up in the morning quite quickly because the sun just comes over and warms up that.
Yeah.
And then in the evening we have shade from about 5 o'clock on, depending on the time of year. We can sit out in the deck nicely in the shade in the deck, for some time and whatever. So it's set up on the property well to suit the windows.
Now, you even didn't just put a lot of thought into the design of the interior and how you really, really wanted it, but you also put a lot of thought into where on the property and how it would be situated as well, didn't you?
Yeah, that was kind of fun because it's properties owned by our family members, and they were gracious enough to let us park it here. So we picked an area. We needed to be close to water and to electricity. So it wasn't like we could go way out in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, we have a fantastic view. They also let us build a studio right beside our tiny house. So when John was working, he worked in the studio, and I have a craft room in there. And so that gives us some extra space to go and do stuff. And yeah, I spend a fair bit of time in that. And
so was there anything, while you were doing all that, then was there anything that you just love about your home right now that maybe almost didn't come to pass?
Something that what I love about our home is our deck. And that almost didn't come to pass because we moved in September, and we had to have a deck. We had to have something. We get a lot of snow up here, so we built this little porch. 4x6 porch, or maybe even smaller. And John was working full time, and he was like, I don't have time.
It's a
and
covered
so
porch.
I started, and then John, of course, chipped in because
So I'm watching Val build this porch. So, if you know Val and myself, I draw everything, I calculate everything, and I have everything worked out, to the inch or whatever. And Val doesn't wait for that. She just starts building.
I just get the wood and start.
I'm thinking while I'm working, I'm watching her outside building, and I'm thinking, I don't know if that's going to stand the snow,
So he came out and he helped me build, and our son-in-law came, and we all got it together. So that was a really small deck. And then from there, that deck has grown. Every year we add to it. So our deck is like another room.
How big is it now? They both look outside. That's hilarious.
It's about 24 by 15, 16.
So?
Yeah.
Okay.
So now moving on from that, you started off in the one tiny home, but then you built yourself this addition. Why did you do that?
The studio?
That's right.
Yeah. So he was working from home, which meant, getting on his computer at 8 o'clock every morning and shutting it down at 4 o'clock. And he did it on the kitchen counter.
And I spend a lot of time on the phone, talking to different engineers or whatever. And I like to walk and talk. And sometimes I'm a little louder than I should be. So Val would be in the house listening to all this. I think she could probably do my job as well as I can now, just from osmosis.
Yeah.
So she ended up getting a pass at the local swimming pool and just going swimming a lot so that she could get away from me. So we said, okay, we got to build a studio. I have to have a place where I can work and not, be overwhelming inside. So we built the studio. A third of it is my office, and the back 2/3 is Val's sewing room because she's also a seamstress. So and that's where that's her passion, and that's where she kind of gets rid of stress. So and we put a wall in between, almost soundproof, so I could talk all I wanted while she was sewing and listening to whatever she did. So yeah, it worked out really, really well. But that first winter, prior to building that, it was pretty tight in here. You know, it was pretty tight. I mean, if you have a job where you don't have to, you can tell I like to talk and fairly loud. If you have a job where it's quiet and you can just kind of mouse in the corner, that's one thing. But if you have another job where you're talking a lot on the phone and doing
because he
sales,
was drawing, I think you had two screens up, like
Yeah, I did.
two big screens
every
up,
morning
and
I had
it
to set
was
up 2 screens, and I had to set up the whole thing on. I took up half the counter space. You know,
yeah.
you're working in the kitchen.
So it was all quite necessary for you to actually do that. Do you think you, like, having living tiny and having the space around made it a lot easier to just go ahead and make that decision? Hey, let's just build another one. Or was there actually some red tape you had to go through? How easy was it to do that?
Well, the
It was very
intent
easy.
the intent from the very
Cool.
beginning was to do that. One of the things that Val said was, I'll live tiny, but I'm not going to give up my sewing. That's her passion. So the intent right from the get-go, build something for Val to work out of. But red tape wise, up north, middle of nowhere up north, there's a lot of live and let live up here, which is really nice.
The studio is on basically
Cinder blocks.
So we could move
rails.
it if we have to. And that was the idea. Like, our family owns a property. They were keen to know that if we had to move it, it could be moved. So that was one of the things. And right now it's fine. We don't have any plumbing in there. There's just electric heat in there.
Is it a trailer? Does it have wheels on it?
No,
No,
it doesn't.
How would
it's-
you move it? If you had to move it, you would just crane it onto a trailer.
Yeah, it's basically on skids. You could move it if you wanted to. And the idea being, ever sold the property and wanted to move, or say just wanted to move, it could be moved. But our intent, possible intent for it, is that it can be changed into a cabin and lived in.
Oh yeah.
You could just bring some water in and live in it. Put a composting toilet in it, and you could live in it just like I'm talking about a vacation thing.
Yeah.
For someone to come a couple, right? So it could be adapted quite easily to do that. So now that I'm retired, Val's using it for sewing, but my office is closed down,
And we also had a freezer in there. We used it for storing, or if we did a Costco run and you get stuff.
Yeah. So even though we're minimalists, minimalists and Costco don't quite go hand in hand. So
it's more like hoarders and Costco go hand in hand.
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I can go to Costco and just come out with 3 items.
But the overflow ends up in the studio, right? So it's kind of like a spot to put things. There's really inside here, as far as storage for clothing and things like that. We are minimalists in that respect. We don't have a lot of extras.
No, you have to have that sort of mindset if you're going to go tiny, even partially tiny. If you're going to reduce your footprint, you absolutely must have a minimalist attitude in some way. Otherwise, you wouldn't even have been thinking that. So now you've been in your tiny home for how long now?
4 years.
It'll be 4. It was 4 years September.
It was 4 years in September.
This will be year 5. It was up here a year previous to us moving in.
What has been the most wonderful thing, maybe even something that you didn't expect, that you've experienced being in your tiny home now?
I don't know if it's tiny house related, but I think just that we spend a lot of time outside, and that we're very aware of the seasons now, and just the outdoors. And we have this incredible view. I posted a lot on Instagram because it blows me away every time we look outside. But that view, that we spend that much time outside, and that
and just moving out to the country. We were urban. We were heavily urban before. Moving out to the country is such a relief. It's really nice to just head outside and not have a crowd waiting for you. So
we've had moose come through. I had a lynx on my deck one morning.
Yeah.
We've had a weasel come right up to the door and look at the dog, and so it's totally different.
Come by. We haven't seen the bear.
We haven't seen the bear, but we've seen his evidence. So
you'd rather just see the evidence, anyways.
Yeah.
So winter's coming up now. What sort of things do you do to prepare your tiny home for winter? Do you have a routine that you go through?
Yeah, we have a list. John usually takes care of that. That's his department.
Yeah, just outdoor things. So, we have a wood stove, and that's our primary heat. We have backup heat as electrical. So we need to have enough wood to make it through the winter. And you go through a surprising amount of wood, especially when it gets really cold out.
Oh, I
So,
can imagine.
yeah, we've got wood in 3 different places at all different sort of dryness, and then we're getting some more wood soon. You don't need much. I mean, a cord of wood will probably go through the winter, quite easily. But yeah, we've been collecting wood. We have to clean the chimney for the wood stove. We have to make sure that we have a heated hose. We have to make sure that the heated hose works, and that all of that is ready to go. We've got an end compartment that has water in it. Have to make sure that that heater is working properly and that everything is closed tight.
And you usually go under the house and make sure all
Yeah.
the insulation is still in place, and we've got insulated boxes around our drains and
Yes.
stuff.
Yeah, so we've learned over time. I mean, every year there's a little something, right? You think you've got everything right, and every year there's a little something that needs to be added to. Here's an example. So we bought a fairly high-end washer dryer, thinking, okay, we've got the money. Let's buy a nice washer dryer. So it's ventless, in that when when Mint Tiny Homes built it, they put a dryer vent outside. Right? So you got the normal sort of flapping dryer vent outside. And they thought, not knowing whether we'd buy ventless or not. So they put it in, but didn't attach anything to the vent. There's nothing to attach to it. So when we had minus 35, it was getting close to minus 40. The trap behind the wash machine froze. And we thought, what happened? How did that happen? Right? So then we shut the door, and I see that when we shut the door, these flaps go up and down. I'm like, okay, so when I shut the door, it's pretty well airtight. These flaps go up and down. Well, just a minute. That vent isn't attached to anything. And I get on my hands and knees and look through the vent. And it's just a hole going right to the trap behind the wash machine. So quickly fix that up, and put insulation in, pulled it out, and fixed it up. But that didn't happen till like year 3.
Yeah.
It wasn't cold. See, here's the difference. It was cold enough, but we had enough snow that it was covering it, so it was insulating it. But we don't have enough snow to insulate it. Then when it gets cold, that cold air was hitting the back of the wash machine.
Yeah.
Little things
They had to have the right circumstances even just to notice the big gaping hole in the wall.
Exactly. So then, we have insulated skirting. So we have to make sure that skirting is proper and that there's no gaps for wind to get through. But then we also had the trap and the shower freeze at minus 30. So what I did was I spray foamed the trap. Then I put soft insulation around that. Then I took hard insulation, styrofoam, and built a box around that. So it's covered in 3 ways. And then when it gets down to minus 30, we put in RV antifreeze, just a cupful after we take a shower or something, so that overnight it won't freeze. And I have a long screwdriver that I'll pop the grate off, and I'll kind of swish it around and see if it's frozen or not. And it hasn't frozen since. But
I find that actually quite brilliant to dump a little antifreeze after you're done, just to get it in the lines. And
if it's RV antifreeze, it's not poisonous to animals or anything like that, right? I mean, you don't want to drink it for supper or anything. But
well, no, that's great advice. I'm wondering. I'll bet you not a lot of people thought of that. That's great.
Yeah, so you just pour you don't need much. Just the trap doesn't hold that much. So you just put a little bit down after your shower, and then that's when you start the next time. It's okay. So little things like that we've learned over time. We've had things freeze, and we've gone through 2 heated hoses. We've got a third one now that's working perfectly, but the 2 that we first got were not very good. They weren't. One of them leaked really badly. The other one just didn't keep up.
Would you say last year
Sometimes it's just trial and error.
was our first winter with no incidences? Or
that's when we had the wash machine.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So every winter we learned something.
Yeah. So it was winter number 3, or was it 4, that we had the wash machine thing freeze. So what I had to do after that was, when I got snow around the house, I just kind of throw it towards the house and create kind of a berm around the house, which also helped insulate it. But then we got a hose out of the United States. It's called No Freeze hose, I think. It's an industrial hose, and it is incredible. Like, it's got heat trace going through it, but then pigtails on either end. You take the pigtail and you put it around your spigot, or you put it around, we have a frost-free hydrant. You put it around the faucet on that end. I also heat trace the hydrant itself, but that's where the weak points are, right? Where it's connecting to the house, where it's connecting to the hydrant. And when you can put the pigtail on it and wrap it around it, I could bet you I could go down. We're thinking of going down to -30 or more with it this year, where before I used to go on to the tank, like we have a freshwater tank. I used to switch over to the freshwater tank at about -18. So, little things like that make a huge difference in the middle of winter. So,
how much time do you spend in the winter sort of maintaining, checking, making sure everything's working right?
It feels like a lot, but I don't think it is.
For me, it was, because we also have, we've got a air system in here that is supposed to recirculate the air. And it was supposed to be set up for cold climates, but I think they put in the lower grade one, unfortunately. So what would happen is when it got to about -15, 18, it would freeze over. The humidity from inside the house,
the vents on the wall,
the vent outside. Yeah. So it's what it would do. It would pulse. It would draw air in one and push it out the other, and then it would switch and it would draw air in the other and push it out. So as it pushed the air out, the air being humid would freeze over that grill. So I had to go up there, pull them off, and get the ice off them, and then go back up with a ladder on the side of the house, right?
In the winter.
And I did that, every 4th day or something like that.
When it got really cold.
Right? When it got cold. And if it got to -30, I just turned it off.
Well, of course, you only get the worst problems the colder it gets. It can't,
The rule is that all rules go out the window at -30. There are no rules.
I couldn't agree more.
30 or below, there's no rules. You just
And the other thing is, we get a lot of moisture in our tiny home, and I think any tiny home is subject to moisture because it's such a small space, and your propane gives off moisture. You take a shower, our ventless dryer gives off moisture. Just humans and pets give off moisture.
Your breathing, yeah.
So, and when the house is sealed up in the winter, all that moisture sticks around. So anywhere where there's something against the wall, if you've got a pillow against the wall or clothes against the wall, you will get mold.
And
like
I
in the
also
closet.
think it's a change of temperature between inside and outside. If there's no ventilation, like no air movement between, and you put something against that wall, over time you're going to get some mold or something behind there. So you have to be really aware.
We're always on a mold watch.
Yeah, we had under our couch, we got the pull-out boxes, for storage, and those boxes were against the wall. And we noticed when we pulled them out that a lot of stuff in there was starting to get some mold or whatever. So Val drilled holes in all the sides of them. She got the drill out and started drilling holes in them so that we could get some air movement instead of just a plane of plywood or a plane of whatever.
It made a difference.
You are both just too clever by far. I'm telling you straight up,
Val bought these vents, these grills to put on the front. So now there's air coming through the front and through. Before it was just a plain piece of wood. So you know what? You learn as you go. I mean, there was nowhere we could go where people lived up north. Like if you go look up videos, they're all New Mexico and Texas and whatever.
Yeah.
How many videos can you see of people that live up north that are living in a tiny home?
Very few. Yeah.
Very, very few.
Depends how loose you are with the classifications, but if you ask me, it's almost zero. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's more now. I mean, there's lots of builders in BC, and there's lots of builders in not our area, but in the central. And I think you are getting more houses.
Well, we actually do have two members on the two directors on the board here at Tiny Home Alliance that do both live in tiny homes, and both here in Canada. So Barbara lives in Lethbridge. I mean, not too many people get winter like Lethbridge does. And then of course we have Adrian, our vice president, who lives in Ontario. Central southern Ontario.
Okay.
And of course they've got the lakes there and the rivers. So, when it gets windy, it gets ridiculously cold, and it's always windy out there. So
yeah, we lived in Ontario for 8 years as well.
But we get some pretty bad wind that hits the front of our tiny house too, like where our deck is. So we've actually kind of closed in our deck just because of that wind that comes off the field. I mean, it's a beautiful view, but it just brings in all the wind from that field.
Val found a bunch of doors online and glass doors. So we've been sort of building ourselves a glass wall around to keep.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Well, I cook outside a lot. I cook outside all the time. So that enclosure keeps my cooking area clean and windproof and snowproof and rainproof.
And super classy too. I mean, you're going to look like an Earl's Diner. People are going to come looking for a table.
Oh, not there yet.
Not there yet. We started off this conversation talking about how when you go tiny, even just thinking about it, you kind of have to have that minimalist attitude. Now, 4 kids and a wide variety of animals doesn't sound like a minimalist attitude. How do you guys deal with that, and how does that work for you guys?
Well, our kids are all grown. They're
well, that helps.
So we are on property that's owned by family, and they have a ton of animals, so we get to enjoy theirs. And then we have a dog, and we have a cat. And we've just always had, when our kids were little, we had 3 dogs and 3 cats. So this is downsizing pets for us.
But if you think back, Val, right from the get-go, our first house was the size of an apartment.
Yeah, it was 800 square feet.
We had a tiny home, to start with. It was a small house. And then when we had the 4 kids, we had a house with a living room that was 10 foot by 10 foot. And they would have kids over.
Well, and we had teenagers.
And we had pocket doors on both sides, so that the kids would spill out into the hallway. We've always lived in homes that weren't huge, and we always found we always liked houses that were cozy. Mm-hmm. So that minimalist attitude, kind of started there.
We keep little pets,
and we have small dog, and so. In a way, we started off with a really small house, an apartment-sized house, and loved it. We loved the coziness of the little house. And then once we had kids, well, that didn't work. So you ended up with a bigger home, but we never really had something huge. And we've always liked cozy. So we would go, like, say, an Airbnb or whatever. They didn't have them back then, but we'd get a cabin. And we'd get a small cabin on a lake or something for a vacation for a few days. And we'd look at each other and say, I could live in this, this, I don't much more than this. And we both agreed on that. So it was in the back of our mind, we've always been somewhat minimalistic.
Just you've had the mindset. I mean, that's pretty obviously, you obviously, the only reason you went bigger was because, more people. I mean,
right.
But your square footage per person, if I understand you correctly, really hasn't gone up.
No, probably not.
So, and that's kind of the mindset we had. We, a lot of our friends retired and got mansions, and we retired and said, we don't really need that. The more you own, the more you have to maintain. And the more you have, the more you have to clean, and you have to heat, and you have to whatever. And, this just feels right. It doesn't feel, like I said before, it doesn't feel like a tiny home. It feels like home.
Well, you two definitely seem, super happy and super comfortable. You've obviously done your homework. You meet all of the challenges, and, you're not looking to your builder to fix it. You're not looking to anything else, but you're going at it with, let's just fix this. And you're coming up with some really innovative solutions. And I think that your solutions would be really helpful and really valuable for our community and people that are asking those questions who might not see those solutions.
We're always happy to share what we've learned along the way, and what worked and what didn't, because lots of times
people
stuff
come by and want to take a tour, and we'll give them the tour, and we'll give them all the information they want or need. Some people are thinking of going that way, or some people are just curious. So.
All right. Well, you get to your members of Tiny Home Alliance. That's why you're here having an interview. We always want to share the stories of people that are sponsors of Tiny Home Alliance, especially, and supporters of tiny homes in general. So with that, I think we're gonna call this this chat to a close.
Okay.
I want to thank you two for taking the time and being so patient with me, especially. Coming to chat, share your stories with our community. Everybody, we're definitely going to have Valerie and John back for another chat later on. Thanks, John and Valerie, for meeting with us and having a chat today.
You're welcome.
You're
nice
very
to
welcome.
chat.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you guys later.
Okay. Bye, friend.
Goodbye.